commission meeting. Go somewhere else. It'll be much more entertaining probably. But thanks for coming tonight. And would you first, we need to start off with a call to order and then a pledge to the flag. If you would join me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yeah, they moved. Roll call, please.
Chair Wolf.
Here.
Vice Chair List.
Here.
Member Friend.
Here.
Member Lowry.
Here.
Member Roby.
Here.
First item is the consent calendar and a review of, which includes the agenda from our last meeting and the minutes from our last regular meeting.
Mr. Chairman, on page 5, I guess it's a 5, yeah. On page 5, it has me listed both as voting yay and nay. And so we need to correct that I only voted once and I voted nay.
Well, okay. I thought you were a super commissioner and you got to do it twice. Are there any items the commission wishes to pull from the consent calendar? Public? Oh, okay, we'll move on to items of interest to the general public. This is the point, if you haven't been here before, where we seek public comment on items that are not on tonight's agenda. We will give you 3 minutes to address any issue you want to bring before the commission that's not on tonight's agenda. But before we start, I need to do a mea culpa of sorts. I've been a little too lenient in allowing people more and more time during the public comment of meetings and in the public comment portion relating to items. Tonight, in the spirit of trying to be a little more fair to everybody, we're going to hold to that time limit, and then we've kind of gotten in a habit, and some of you folks are here that are part of this as well as me. We give a little bit of extra time and deference to applicants, but everybody only gets one bite at the apple tonight, and I think that will result in fairer, more expeditious meetings. So, if anybody wishes to address the commission on items not on tonight's agenda, this is your opportunity. All right, I scared everybody. I'm sorry. We'll move on to the public hearing portion of the meeting, and our first item is item 4.1, 209 Main Street. And that was my phone that went off. I apologize.
Before we do that, Chair Wolf, I do want to let the public know that we did receive a written comment just before the meeting started this evening, and it's from Kirk Smith related to item 4.3 on tonight's agenda. I was given 4 copies, 3 of which are up there for you. I have 1 for the file. I am not aware if Mr. Smith has provided one to the applicant. Okay.
Question to staff. So,
Okay.
and you just said 4.3. Did you mean 4.1?
Thank you. So, for those of you who have not read the agenda for tonight's meeting, item 4.1 it relates to 209 Main Street. It's a request to alter the exterior of an existing commercial restaurant building and site, resulting in a major change to an approved site plan review. Can we have a staff report, please?
Certainly. At your last meeting back on January the 19th, you continued possible action on this request by the owners of the property, as well as the operators of the restaurant, Jack Russell Restaurant and Bar, to your March 1st meeting. The commission requested additional information identifying and describing landscaping, the keystone wall improvements, fencing, exterior lighting locations, a photometric plan for the site, and information regarding the rear patio improvements. Staff met with the property owner representative, Mr. Thomas, a few days after the commission meeting. Mr. Thomas informed staff that the beginning of March is the anticipated opening of the restaurant. He requested that staff move up the commission's review of the supplemented request to this meeting, February 16th, to allow time for proposed improvements, if approved, to be completed before the early March restaurant opening. Staff accommodated the request once it received timely the supplemental project information, which is provided to you as attachment A of staff's report. This particular notice, this required a renoticing of this item before you as a public hearing, and those costs totaling $40.45 have been made a project condition for you to consider as a condition of approval should you move forward. Proposed improvements, in staff's opinion, would enhance the site and the restaurant building, furthering the city's goals, policies, site plan review design criteria, as staff has analyzed in its report and its report for January 19th. Staff believes the commission can affirmatively make the findings that staff has prepared on page 5 of staff's report, then conditionally approve their court request with the addition of condition 1 through 12 on pages 6 and 7. Mr. Chairman, the applicants and their agent is in the audience this evening, and that concludes my staff report.
Any questions of staff before we invite the applicant to address the commission? Okay, so I see several applicant people. Go ahead and let's have your turn.
Thank you very much. My name is Dennis Thomas, and you remember me from last time. I'm representing the Putta Family Partnership, and we went about trying to add a few extra nice things to the building, if that's the technical term, to enhance the beauty of the building. Since the business owner, Jack Russell Brewery, has worked so hard at the things that they've done, we wanted to add to that, and so that is why we took the time to actually do this. It was on them to take care of these things, but we took it over for them. And notwithstanding the cost of the $500 fee, and notwithstanding the cost of preparing the application and the subsequent reports and renderings per your request, I have a few further comments regarding this process and our subsequent application. Last meeting of January 19th, the staff recommended that you approve our request for minor changes to the exterior of the building site. That, in their opinion, it met the standards. Commissioner Lowry also questioned the necessity of the level of scrutiny that was being placed on our project. In my opinion, common sense did not prevail. The discussion of our project seemed to take on a life of its own. Statements were made that were inaccurate, all while I, the applicant, was available to be asked these questions right here in the audience if called upon, and I was never called upon. It would appear that you desire not to come to a reasonable and evident conclusion at the time, and it was very unfortunate. I would also like to point out that the staff had to spend what I consider an inordinate amount of time, another 7-page report, basically to say what they have already said, and to point out to the commission how we did meet the standards and did meet the qualifications with material and products that follow the city's guidelines. Our request was a simple request in nature, and it will add some limited additional aesthetic, what I would consider pleasing elements to the building. So let's talk about those for a minute as you go through the application. The wood cladding. We have a sample for you to take a look at here. It is our intent, as illustrated in our renderings, to give a slight age look to the warm fill. Would you guys like to take a close-up look of that piece of material that we have? Sure. Sample? Could you? This is Bruce Harkey. He is the managing contractor for the project. So what you see before you is the wood cladding with the board and batten that will be on the columns surrounding the building. The painting on that wood cladding is a 3-stage process to give it that slightly aged, warmer feel rather than just a flat paint. In your documents, you'll see it noted the brand and the color that we are using. Okay. You also see it is our intent to provide a slight industrial feel that will complement the natural wood with the corrugated metal. The look will carry on to the interior of the building, where a similar element will complement and tie together some of the older woods that we'll be using inside of the building. We will be using a naturally aged corrugated metal, as you can see there, that patinaed look. With regard to the rear patio, oh, also, you saw a piece of black wood. That is going to be used to frame out the corrugated metal. Didn't want to leave that out. Correct, thank you. With regard to the rear patio, there was quite some discussion regarding the rear patio. That was not on our request for consideration and is not part of our presentation. According to city staff, we were not required to go through the Planning Commission for that element of this project. I would recommend you direct your questions regarding that to the appropriate city staff. And I would like to note that we have spent an extensive amount of time working with the planning department and building department to meet all the appropriate requirements. We, primarily the owners of Jack Russell Brewery, have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars to upgrade the interior of this tired building. Had it been part of the requirements by the city, we would have worked in a cooperative and collaborative manner, just like we have with this entire project. And we appreciate the professionalism of the staff as we have gone through this process. With regard to the landscaping, with the original landscaping plan in place, we did not feel the need to complete another one. According to the city guidelines, it is not necessary. There seems to be some confusion as to the requirement of a landscape plan on our part. On your part. Again, we wanted to keep our application simple and specific. We wanted to address a few key elements with the Planning Commission to make some minor enhancements to the exterior aesthetics of the building. And we would hope that that future business owners and building owners would be able to do this without so much animus. With the lighting. As for the lighting, we have a sample light here. Did we have a sample light? I didn't see that. We did not bring a sample light tonight. My apologies. Pardon me? Okay. You have the renderings, and you also have the tear sheets for the product. Regarding the photometric study, I strongly believe that common sense did not prevail in this discussion regarding this item. The additional items that have been provided has further given credence to city planner painter's assertion that the lighting fixture and placements have met the requirement without having an excessive additional cost of a photometric study. The fencing. Again, a common sense seemed to be missed on this element as well. Your concern that we did not have the exact type of clear stain we intended to use rose to such a level of scrutiny that you added this to the list of issues with our request. Well, we removed this from the request because we did not have the time to wait for the next meeting. You see, we had a fence already approved through the building permit and was attempting to make an upgrade, triggering the Planning Commission review. Since we were unable to demonstrate what a clear sealant we were using, and it appeared the commission was unwilling to accept at face value that we were going to use a clear sealant, we pulled the element from our request. We pulled it because the owner had an ABC inspection that they needed a fence to be put up before that time. Granted, timing was not on our side. We brought you an issue that timing didn't work out right, but again, I think common sense would have led you to believe that we would have put a clear stain on that wood and it would have been appropriate and just fine. With regard to a gentleman that had just distributed some documents for tonight's meeting regarding this issue, that is not on the agenda, and that is not part of our meeting tonight. And so I don't see the relevance of it. So I would appreciate that we stick to what our request is and what is before you. I'd also like to turn over to property owner Judy Putoff. She has a few words to say as well.
Thank you. I'm Judy Putoff, managing partner of Putoff Family Partnership, the owner of the property. One of my earliest memories is of my dad, Vince Waldron, who many of you may have known, pumping gas at his Flying A station in his crisp white uniform and black bow tie on this corner. I grew up around this corner. After World War II, I remember walking through the old Greyhound bus depot that was behind my dad's Flying A gas station. He bought that old Greyhound bus depot. He tore it down, and he built his car dealership, Waldron Pontiac. He was a proud member of this community and a fine businessman for 35 years. When he needed to retire, he sold his dealership. Pontiac would not approve local people who were qualified to do it. He had to turn it over to a division manager, sell it to him on terms. Fella found out about Lake Tahoe and gambling and went through a 35-year history of a strong dealership. In 18 months, left my dad holding the bag, and he had to tear down the building, take it back, lose the money he should have had, and he leased the property to Vips. The rest is history. I inherited a 40-year-old lease. 8 years ago, I started the process of looking ahead to what could happen here. I talked to leasing agents and I prayed that Caros would not exercise that last 5-year option. They did. And it was with great joy last year that they went belly up and we got this project. We got this building back a year early. I'd already been talking to David. We were underway. He thought he had a whole year until this lease was up in July of 2016. He scrambled like heck to get the project going. On January 19th, it was a joy to have the additions to this project at 209 Main Street, the former Caros building, come before you and to celebrate our excitement at having David's Downtown Ale Works coming to Placerville and to working with a local business owner. I did not want another corporate tenant, another unknown, faceless entity to come into town on this prime, important corner. As this project advanced and timelines and budgets were blown, our partnership wanted to help David out and do some finishing touches to the building. And by the way, part of your request is for a bike rack. We will do any damn bike rack you want. Obviously, you felt that you did not have sufficient information. Later, we realized that pages were missing from the paperwork given to us to fill out for that January 19th meeting. You might want to check that all of those packages are complete before they're given out to applicants so that we're able to provide everything you need. You've now been given actual samples of building materials and more images and information. Hopefully, that has answered your questions. At the offset, may I please express, as I did in my letter to you, my confusion about the outcome of the January 19th meeting. Planning staff came to you with project approval and assurance that the items submitted met code and city criteria. Commissioner Lowry rightly asked at one point that evening about the level of scrutiny that is appropriate to your deliberations. The January 19th meeting descended into picking the project apart. It reminded me of vultures. Ignoring staff approval, bringing up items not on the agenda, and putting off further consideration to March 1st. Many of you had been through the project, yet not one of you asked, when is he going to open? You just put it off to March 1st. He was supposed to open March 1st. That was his intent. We had to ask to be on tonight's calendar, scramble to get a presentation together, pay more fees, and appear tonight. I've driven 3.5 hours to be here. Mr. Thomas has spoken of the effect such unwelcoming behavior as exhibited on January 19th has on property developers. It's tough out there, folks. I've been doing this for over 40 years. I've managed all of our properties. I've managed Hangtown Village Square. I've managed Broadway Plaza. I've managed our ownership of the World Savings property, the parking lot at Bank of America. I've been around the block. I know what times were like 40 years ago, and I know how awfully hard it is now. We pour heart, soul, energy, labor, hard-earned money, and hard-borrowed money into projects aimed to bless this community. I happen to think we've done a pretty damn good job in this community. You ought to know us. You ought to know the projects we represent. Tonight, one item has been removed from our request, the fence, and a future addition, an additional patio, scrapped on this project. Our partnership had also been planning to tear down one of our major projects and to do a new project that would best bless Placerville. I have scrapped that, and the property's been listed for sale. I would hope that tonight you allow David Cody to go forward with the remaining building improvements, and that this experience sparks a re-examination of the proper role of the Planning Commission and a willingness to be supportive and welcoming to future projects that come before you. Are we not better with David Ale Works and what's being done to this building than the old Caro's decrepit business and property, the way it looked? I don't know why you couldn't see that. We're not asking for favors, but I think we have a right to expect fairness. Thank you.
Anyone else speaking on behalf of the applicant? Okay, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing, the rest of the public hearing on this item, and any of the members of the public wishing to talk for 3 minutes on the project, this is your opportunity to do so.
Kirk Smith of Placerville. A few corrections are in order. The scrutiny you provided on January 22nd is no different than the rest of us. Secondly, it's no different than you've done in other projects. For example, with Tractor Supply, that was to be a change of a present building, and the examination included requiring them to have a higher fence and things of that kind. You talked about a fence before, and now they went ahead and went forward and did the fence. As far as not getting the forms to them, they're on the website. Anybody can download them, and so you have a chance to double check. I think that I agree with Mrs. Putoff that this is an opportunity for you to re-examine your role. You have a tremendous amount of power. Last time, one of you asked a question of staff, which is, what about that sign up there? And the staff told you that you don't have authority for that. You're the position of making that determination, not staff. You know that you were vested with responsibility for the Historic Advisory Committee. That gives you a chance for review. You also have the chance to review projects when they're close to historic landmarks. And one of the oldest buildings in town is nearby. I identify with business people. My father was on the other side, the Shell station, a long time ago. We've been around for a long time too. I know what it's like to be screwed over by the city. Hey, talk to Wilbur Howe. So that's not the issue. The issue is you're going to treat people the same. And you have other areas that are historic districts, but you haven't done the same for this one. If someone comes in here and they've got a time crunch, that's a problem. But the cure was to have started much earlier. I was disappointed. This is just for your benefit, because I think Cleve saw this at the PDA meeting. The Caro's sign, you mean that sign is not in our domain? Not in your domain? That's just very troublesome. This is one of the proposals that we could have made, but it was slipped through. It just looks like an unusual use of private property for private gain. There was no open negotiation. You're talking about public property for right in front of the street. There was that caboose was something where the community contributed to having it used for a visitor center. There was no chance to do this. All the discussion, all the negotiation was in the back room. So if you're up against the timeline, that's not your doing. Thank you. Have I done my 3 minutes? You might have that, they have a clock up there.
One more.
I have more time?
You have 1 more minute?
Oh, I can't believe that.
Oh, now it's 30 seconds.
So I think that your decisions are not things we all agree with, but they're no different. You didn't handle them any differently up there, other than I think you ought to assert your responsibility. You make the decisions, not staff. If you possibly think that you had no control over the sign when you're supposed to be part of the Historic Advisory Committee role, or when you have a number of buildings that are of historic nature close, that's what anchors a site review. So I just hear these different answers. The tractor supply company had site review.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public comment part of the hearing and bring the item back to the commission for discussion and possible action. Anybody want to go first?
Question for staff, if I might, Mr. Chairman. So, Pierre and Andrew, concern is raised that the commission considered some items in the original review of this project that weren't specifically up for consideration. 2 examples being the lighting on the roof and as well as the rear patio area. But it's my understanding that when we have a site plan review, documents coming before us, that we do have the opportunity to review and condition as we see appropriate. Did we miss something with that?
The items before you, because you have an approved site plan review, are relative to the request by the applicant, unless there are issues related to glare, things like that, that we would want to correct with under new codes that may have not have been in effect in 1976 when this permit was entitled.
I meant to grab the application that we had reviewed the last time, but I couldn't locate my hands on it. But
Yeah, it did not include the roof-mounted lights.
Right, but I just happened to notice them by in the photograph, and so it seemed like, what are we going to do with those? It didn't seem to me to be outside of the realm of what we could consider. Well, back to the chair.
I think the applicant stated in their materials that they are planning to remove those.
In tonight's materials, I don't recall that was mentioned in the original. That's why I wish I'd been able to
Yeah, it was
find
not known to staff at that
Okay.
time.
So, Mr. Chairman, first of all, I'm going to thank the applicant for providing the sample materials and clarification on a number of issues that the commission, I think, in its diligence at the last meeting had, and I believe that they were legitimate. I think we have to draw a distinction between an application meeting the minimum requirements and then the commission's obligation to not only reviewing the application, but also making certain that applications meet, for example, Goal B of the General Plan's Community Design section regarding the visual quality and use of materials. This is the intersection of Highway 49 and US 50. This is in a scenic corridor. Other projects that have come before us in this particular area have come under extreme scrutiny, and we've denied applicants' use of materials on that basis. I don't think there's any substantial basis for asserting that the commission reviewed this project any differently. There were questions, legitimate questions. Materials provided to us this evening go a long way towards resolving those questions. We have an obligation to due diligence. Once the application is approved, once the project is approved, it's really done. And we're going to discuss a project later on this evening where there's been a code violation now going on, I don't know, 10, 15 years. And so we're trying very hard to catch these things at the outset. And it's just the way it is. I'm happy with the project as it's presented this evening. And I would move approval with the conditions as stated, adopting the staff report as part of the public record. And the findings as indicated on Roman numeral 2 and Roman numeral 3, conditionally approved, SPR 7605R, with the changes as noted, and adopting the conditions of approval 1 through 12 with no additions.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion with a second. Any other discussion on the item from the commission? I have a comment. I think it's interesting that I've experienced this as an agent for applicants myself, and I've experienced it as a commissioner before. And it's probably helpful to remind us all that, you know, we have last time I looked, we have a zoning ordinance, and the zoning ordinance is adopted by the city council on behalf of the people of the community. And as part of that zoning ordinance, there's a three-legged table that has to hold up, interpret, and enforce that zoning ordinance. It's the city staff, the planning commission, and ultimately the city council. And everybody, those three organizations all really only have that one task of ensuring compliance with the zoning ordinance. I take a little bit of personal and professional umbrage at getting scolded for doing that. Perhaps that's a harsh word, but we just need to keep things in perspective here. The planning commission would be, we would be negligent in the performance of our duties if we let ourselves be overly influenced by just the economic requirements of a project or just by particular individuals. So I think the planning commission has done what it needs to do in regards to this item. And in my, I think it's only been 7 years on the planning commission, and in my mere 25 years as a resident of Placerville, I realize that still makes me somewhat of a flatlander in the eyes of some, but I'm very comfortable with the fair and open approach to this project. We may disagree about it, we may have different opinions about it, but I think we've been open and fair with the project. And in that context, I think it's a great project. I intend to vote for the project, but I would like to correct the record that while I didn't do it here at this meeting, one of the first questions I asked when I visited the site was, when is this project supposed to open? When's the plan for the schedule? And schedules have lots of influences on them, and there's lots of ambiguities, and a project schedule is not only determined by the planning commission's activities. Call for a roll call vote unless there's any other comments.
Member Friend?
Aye.
Member Lowry?
Aye.
Member Roby?
Aye.
Vice Chair List?
Aye.
Chair Wolf?
Aye.
For the record,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, that item is appealable within 10 calendar days of tonight's action.
All right, thank you for reminding us of that. We'll move on to item 4.2 on tonight's agenda, 967 Lincoln Street. It's a site plan review for exterior alterations of an existing home within the Bedford Avenue Clay Street Historic Residential District. Staff report, please.
Yes, that would be me tonight. Tonight's request is made by Sam and Madeline Cooper, who own a home at 967 Lincoln Street. It's located at the intersection of Lincoln Alley and Norman Street. It's also located within the Bedford Avenue Clay Street Residential Historic District. The Cooper's request tonight is for site plan review based on the alteration to the exterior appearance of a home within the historic district. Alterations include replacing existing single-hung 1/1 wood frame windows and sashes along the home's west, south, north, and east elevations, replace them with energy-efficient dual-pane vinyl inserts. The windows would resemble the orientation and style of those to be removed. The Coopers also request to replace 2 doors along the home's east elevation. They want to reestablish a garage door in its former opening, reestablish a rear deck, stairs, and landing along the east elevation, make repairs around existing vinyl windows due to water intrusion, and replacing those where indicated on the elevations provided you by the applicant with 1/1 vinyl windows similar to, if not the same, as those proposed to be replaced elsewhere. The applicant also wishes to make repairs as needed to the existing stucco due to that aforementioned water intrusion. The home comprises approximately 1,000 square feet and has 2 levels. The front door faces Lincoln Street. The rear access doors and garage face Clay Street, which is below the site. A 15-foot wide access easement exists, which crosses the property to allow rear yard access to the abutting property to the north at 963 Lincoln Street. The home, the assessor records estimate the home was built in 1938. It's of interest and note to the commission that the abutting home at 963 Lincoln Street is estimated also to be built at the same year, and both share identical architecture and floor plan as the home before you tonight. The project home is not listed on the city's historic inventory. It is not on the State Register of Historic Places or the National Register. City Code requires site plan review approval from the commission prior to issuance of a building permit for exterior alterations that are visible from the street to an existing building within a city designated historic district. Tonight's request provides the commission the opportunity to consider the site plan review request and render a decision to approve with conditions, or deny the request. Staff finds that the proposed scope of work would not diminish the historic character of the district in that it substantially complies with the city's development criteria for historic district alterations. The alterations complement the site and surrounding neighborhood by reestablishing the garage door, the rear deck, the stairs, and landing to the home. And they wish to use materials that match the appearance of those that exist on site today. And rehabilitating a home for continued use as a resident is certainly a city-wide goal, as well as a goal within our housing element. Staff believes the commission can affirmatively make the findings that staff has prepared on pages 6 and 7 of staff's report. Staff recommends conditional approval, subject to conditions 1 through 9 on pages 7 and 8. Mr. Chairman, the applicant and property owner they're both in the audience this evening, and that concludes my staff report.
Thank you. Any questions of staff before we invite the applicant up? Nope. You're on.
Good evening. I'm Sam Cooper. I'm the owner of the property with my wife, Madeline. We purchased the property in the beginning of December of last year, and we're in hopes of repairing it back to kind of its original condition. We didn't know much about it until we actually took the keys, so once we got to that point, we realized there was a lot of things that needed to be rectified before we actually started other construction. So the windows are a main concern. Most of them are broke out anyways. There was a deck there, as you can see in the photo of the east view. There was stairs going down. We'd like to, rebuild that. There's exterior doors that are rotted. Thresholds are no longer any good. That we'd like to take care of those. Just what we want to do isn't that big of a deal, but I understand the process. So we're trying to put back as close to what we're taking out. Obviously, doing it in the most cost-effective way as well. And then the garage, the previous owner had sort of converted into some living space, if you will. Not really, but they put in a French door, and it's rickety. And so we would like to take that out and put a real garage door in. We're going to envelope it with sheetrock inside and make it a true garage again. So sounds major, I guess, but it's, in our case, it doesn't seem that major. I don't know what else to, touch on. I'm sure you guys have probably all reviewed our huge packet.
Any questions for the applicant?
I had one question. Thank you for your presentation. On the garage door component at the bottom, panel designs, it looks like one's got is marked, so it's the short panel that you're considering?
Yes.
Okay. And is the short panel Is that reflective of the photograph above that has the brown doors? So this is what you're looking at?
That's correct.
And the color scheme would be approximately this, or a different color scheme?
It would be the same as the home.
Same
Our
as the home?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Whether it's the same color as the trim or the base color of the house, we haven't figured that out yet, but
Okay.
it will be one or the other.
All right, great, thank you.
Anyone else? I'm prepared to make a motion then that we, wait a minute. I didn't
Point of
do that.
order.
We got to have the rest of the public hearing part. Boy, I was just trying to get it done. Yeah, we're just starting to roll. No more questions? All right, thank you. Anyone else wish to address this project from the public? Thank you. We'll bring it back to the commission for my motion. We'll close the public hearing. I move we accept the findings and recommendations 1A through E on pages 6 and 7 of the staff report, and the conditions of approval on page 7 and 8 of the staff report. This motion includes approval of the use of vinyl retrofit windows in the existing window frames.
I second that.
Any discussion?
I have an observation, Mr. Chairman. On this project, I have, for my consideration, I have the staff report, which we get. I have a very neatly completed application that we get. But then I also have an extremely detailed description of the project, precisely what they're planning to do. I then have a series of drawings, and then these drawings are all supported by actual photographs, and then very specific renditions for the windows and the doors, which really leave very little to my imagination in terms of what's going to happen with this project. It makes it very easy for me to support the motion, and I want to commend the applicant for the detail that they provided, because this is what makes our job far easier than some other projects.
Thank you. I concur. This is this kind of project for a particularly residential projects. It's, how does that phrase go? It's like swimming uphill. It's just kind of hard to figure out sometimes, but we appreciate your thoroughness. We'll take a roll call vote, please, unless there's any other comments.
Member Lowry.
Aye.
Vice Chair List.
Aye.
Chair Wolf.
Aye.
Member Roby.
Aye.
Member Friend.
Aye.
Moving right along, we'll take up item 4.3 for 126 Forney Road, a request for a master site plan amendment to the site plan review and conditional use permit for an existing auto sales and service use.
Yeah, once again, the site is at 126 Forney Road. It's at the southeast corner of the intersection of Forney Road and Brew Road. The site contains an existing auto sales showroom and service building, a detached single-level building containing an auto detailing business, as well as areas for new and used car inventory display area and a vehicle storage area. The site has a general plan and zoning designation of highway commercial. Automobile sales and service uses are conditional within that highway commercial or HWC zone. City building records indicate the presence of automobile sales and service on this site back to the 1960s, as a 1969 building permit for pole signs, three pole signs, back in 1969 was issued for the Ford dealership at the time. Other improvements in planning applications including a 1977 conditional use permit or CUP and a site plan review or SPR for the construction and use of a brand new, at the time, 5,000 square foot detached commercial building. And that's the building I alluded to earlier, the single level building containing the auto detailing business. In the year 2000, the site plan review or SPR 99-10, which is the subject tonight, involving the exterior remodel of the existing auto sales showroom. It also involved a approximately 5,500 square foot showroom and office addition, as well as lighting, landscaping, and an approved master sign package for the site. In 2005, the commission heard a request and denied a major change to the approved master site plan, sign plan for the site, when it disapproved a 32 square foot monument sign at the northeast entrance. This sign was placed without permits and site plan review approval, and denial of the sign makes the sign, which is still on the site, a violation of site plan review 99-10. That sign is also subject to tonight's review. In 2006, the City Council upheld the decision of the Commission regarding the installation of concrete sidewalk along Brew Road, dedication of land for widening of the road right-of-way. These were both conditions of SPR 99-10. This improvement remains unmet. In 2010, the Commission conditionally approved a master sign plan amendment involving the placement of 7 wall signs totaling nearly 500 square feet on the auto sales building. Approval also included a CUP, or conditional use permit, for a new pole sign. 2 years later, in 2012, the Commission considered an amendment to the master sign plan authorizing the pole sign, approved in 2010, to be modified to a height of 20 feet and sign area or sign copy totaling 40 square feet. This structure also contained an LED time and temperature component, and that sign is in existence today and was approved under a conditional use permit. Last fall, Western Sign, representing the property tenant, the Thompson's Auto Group, has requested and submitted a master sign plan amendment to site plan review 99-10, along with a new conditional use permit for a new pole sign and structure. The applicant has provided you with sign elevations, their approximate locations on the site with the site plan, their relative detail as to materials and illumination. Those were provided for you and made part of the packet as attachment A. Now, this winter, after reviewing the application and looking at all this history that I just went over, staff uncovered that permit records from both the building and planning departments surfaced that there are expired permits on the site. One includes the building permit relative to the 2000 site plan review approval, the automobile re-image, the addition, etc. The second that's the building permit. The second, as I mentioned earlier, related to conditions of approval on or within that site plan review that have not been met. Therefore, staff did recorded notices of non-compliance against the property regarding those 2 items, and staff is evaluating further action at this time. Now, tonight's request involves a master sign plan amendment. This would be the 3rd one for the site, and a conditional use permit for the Thompson's Auto Group, but once again, the site tenant. The request involves one new pylon, as the sign company calls it. We call it a pole sign in our code. That would be located near the northwest corner of the site, as illustrated by the site plan that the applicants provided. One new wall sign would be affixed to a new detached tower feature, and this tower feature is really reminiscent of what the commission approved for the Toyota dealership next door a few years back. It appears to be a motif that auto dealers tend to copy one another. That's staff's perspective, but that element is part of tonight's review, as well as the sign that's affixed to it. That sign would face Forney Road and US 50. 6 new wall signs would be mounted on the showroom building's front elevation. A directional sign would be placed near the northwest corner of the site. 3 existing signs would be included in this master sign plan amendment, and these include the unpermitted wall sign that's attached to the building advertising the automobile detailing business, Neiman's. The existing pole sign advertising the Thompson's Auto Truck Center and Time and Temp, which was approved under a CUP back in 2010, as well as the unpermitted ground sign containing the directional information at the east vehicular entrance to the site. That same vehicular entrance is the shared entrance that serves both the Thompson's Toyota and the Thompson's Chrysler Jeep. The requested design is part of a visual uniform design by the Chrysler Corporation for its vehicle dealerships. This uniform look includes the request for the second pole sign for the site, which is distinct from the existing pole sign on the site. Exhibit 1 of staff's report contains the tabulation and sign inventory and sign area in square feet for all new, proposed, and existing signs that make up this master sign plan. The applicant request narrative, the sign details, locations, sign elevations, etc., as I mentioned earlier, were provided to you as attachment A. The signs are subject to the sign regulations within the zoning ordinance, the design criteria under the site plan review ordinance, and the general plan community design section goals and policies relative to signage. Based on the applicant's substantiation of site geography, the business needs for the business, along with the compatible style and character of proposed signage, as staff has conditioned the request, the commission can affirmatively make the required findings to support the request as staff has outlined. It is also noteworthy to point out that since 2000, the commission has permitted master sign plans for the site with similar or more aggregate area and sign quantity than those requested tonight. Staff recommends the commission make the findings on page 8 and conditionally approve the master sign plan amendment for the new pole sign and the amendment to site plan review 99-10. The tenant's agent from Western Sign is in the audience this evening, and that concludes my staff report.
Does the applicant wish to address the commission?
Mr. Chairman, do you have any questions of staff?
Okay. I'm sorry.
At the prerogative of the
I
chair.
jumped the gun again.
At the
He wants to ask a question. We'll get back to
Sorry.
you. My bad.
I guess I'm curious as to the nexus between all of the outstanding non-compliance and other violations and this project, to the extent, why do we have to consider this until these are taken care of?
Well, the city does not have a code section that would require the completion of subsequent items or items that have not been dealt with. My understanding from Director Rivas told me the county has such provisions where an applicant would have to make sure that other items that are relative to that site would need to be addressed before a new application could be submitted. In this case, the city does not have such an action.
That might be a suggestion.
A follow-up question. So anything we may or may not do tonight in terms of action wouldn't prejudice the city's position with these other outstanding items?
No, those items are still enforceable.
They stand alone.
They must be completed, and staff has not determined what its next course of action will be.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I'm sorry. Now it's your turn, sir, to hear from the applicant.
Good evening. Thanks to the staff. We had a lot of talk over this here for the last couple of months. I'm Dennis Schneider. I'm with Western Sign Company, here to help Thompson's make a marriage of the old and the new. Here we're trying to put to bed as many items as we can. That's update signage, remove signage that wasn't approved, get them the dealership signage that Chrysler wants. It's a very nice looking package. We aren't building the signs. We're the contractor and facilitator. We're going to be installing the signs. There's going to be engineering and all that stuff that's brought forward. But it is, if you all have traveled around, you will see this Chrysler branding at all new dealerships. And it's a nice looking package. It's also a chance to separate the Toyota dealership from the Jeep dealership and yet marry them together because they share a driveway. They are two distinct dealerships. So we are redesigning or have redesigned the original sign that was not ever permitted apparently to have it match the showroom and service sign that comes from Chrysler. We had our designer go through and update that so the whole package tends to blend more with the entire building. And with a discrepancy of 1 square foot, Andrew and I are exactly on in our measurements. Yeah, half a foot. We've now shrunk it down. So anyway, this is Mr. Thompson. I don't know how much else I can say other than how the signs are designed, etc.
Did you guys have any questions? I'm Jeff Thompson, by the way. It's nice to be here tonight. I know that you'd mentioned, I didn't realize it was going to come up, but the sidewalk on Brew Road. And I'm just curious of what the city feels as far as Thompson's responsibility to put that sidewalk in as a tenant of Phoenix Wilderness or the Harrell family. Because that was that was made by, I mean, we all, you guys remember, we raised the road out there, and it was the lumber company, us, and at the time, Harrell Motors, to widen Forney Road and make it nice. And, we all had a part in it. We all paid our part of it. And it's my understanding at that point, which was probably right around 2000, that this part didn't get completely, is it the sidewalk you guys are talking about, or is there additional things? I know you mentioned a couple things. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yes. Does staff have any light to shed on this?
Well, there's two relative things regarding conditions of approval from the 1999 site plan review approval. One involves the sidewalk to be installed along Brew Road. The other is a component with that was an offer for dedication of an additional 10 feet to the city for, again, that purpose. And neither of those two actions have been fulfilled by the applicant, by the property owner, who was made aware of that at the time. They are the ones who petitioned and asked the Planning Commission for their determination back in mid-2000s. That went to council, and council it agreed with the Planning Commission's opinion and determination about that condition, and enforced, and their action caused its enforcement. So it's still a component of this site plan review. So there are two components. The other component is related to that, and it's the construction permit that was issued in to involve the proposed improvements to the site. Does that help clarify what? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, and on specifically on this topic, Andrew.
Yeah.
Because I am still a little bit confused. Going on page 2 of the staff report, January 2005, Planning Commission denied a major change to the approved master sign plan, SPR 99-10. Monument sign non-conforming sign was placed without city approval and is considered a violation of SPR 99-10 city code. Is that part of this, the other violations, or do I miss what's happening with that?
That's not part of the notice of non-compliance. That's a separate issue.
But it's another sign?
Yeah, that would be sign
Violation.
K, sign K of tonight's review.
So-
They're proposing to incorporate it into their request tonight.
All right,
And
that's the
staff has added.
that's the correction then for
Yeah.
that violation. All right.
And staff has recommended a condition of approval requiring a decorative base to that sign in order for it to conform to the sign regulations.
So, just so I understand, is that the mentioned an expiration of a construction permit and a couple of violations and not satisfying the requirement for deeding property for a sidewalk. How tightly coupled should those circumstances be, if at all, to our deliberations tonight relative to approving the package of signs?
I think from staff's perspective, you can move forward on what items are before you and let staff deal with the underlying issues relative to the expiration of previous permits.
Thank you very much.
I have a question for the applicant. Mr. Thompson, and I appreciate you being here, and you're related to the other Mr. Thompson
Yes.
in some way.
Yeah, he's my dad.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wasn't going to say it, but that's what I thought. Okay. And I remember when he came before us with regards to the Toyota dealership. And I hate these situations because they're formula applications. They're dictated to you and then ultimately to the community by corporate, okay? And I really just resent them. And I know that other communities have dealt with these in different ways, and I'd like to have a workshop someday on how Placerville might be able to do that. So my my unhappiness is not directed at you. It's just I realize that you're kind of dealing with what's given to you. But there's nothing in these nice signs, to the sign guy, there's nothing in these nice signs to me that have any decorative or visual treatments that have kind of like any relationship to Placerville whatsoever. And I'm curious, and he's shaking his head yes, and I mean, they're just very square boxes just right there. And I'm, what options are available towards softening this a little bit and making it a little bit more attractive? Nice exhibits, by the way. And I'll talk about the pole placement separately here, but what can we do with this? Because I mean, it's very stark. It's functional, certainly, very modern, but beyond that, there's nothing like really special. That's the first question. Second question on pole sign A, on the exhibit you've given us where it shows Thompson, it has Chrysler in red letters. Is the intention for that to be lit? Are those, that's digital?
Those will be lit, yes.
Okay, so,
Just the letters. It's like called.
right, just the letters.
Right.
And is it gonna be similar, like digital bulbs, similar to the time and temperature on the Toyota sign?
No, it's LED lighting, so it's
all LED,
it's
okay.
crisp and clean, but not glaring.
Okay. All right, anyway, so that's one of the two concerns I have. And what options do we have? What can we do? I mean, you have to meet the requirements of corporate, I understand that, but
We went through this with Toyota as well, and we ended up lessening the sheen on the ACM. This is a much smaller treatment as it goes. As you know, the Toyota portal is white and it's lit, and it's very, very noticeable. This is just an ACM entry that's not lit with just Thompson's above it. So it is aluminum. It would be silvery gray, I would imagine.
But not shiny. It's not gonna be a polished Airstream. It's gonna be subdued.
Right. And they also wanted us to put
Similar to
ACM,
what you see over there. Similar in kind of the silvery, but not bright, shiny silvery.
right. And Chrysler had also recommended that we put ACM all around the building, just like Toyota is. And I told them that no, we weren't gonna do that, and there's probably no way we're gonna get it through the city because it's so close to the freeway. So they allowed us to stay with the stucco treatment that's there, with just 4 brand signs and the Thompson's logo going across there. And I did, because I knew that you would ask this, is there any other options? And of course, they stated case after case, town after town, small town, large town, that this is their brand image, and this is, in order for me to have the dealership, this is something that I need to have, like you said.
So addressing the previous question and your answer, if we have, or if Chrysler has a dealership going in downtown Chicago versus Placerville or some other Midwest, they have a set standard of signage and criteria, and you get what you get, and you've got no other options to, as was mentioned, kind of tailor that to the atmosphere and the appearance of other buildings and businesses in that area. Is that correct?
As far as I know, and I mean, I looked in Monterey, I looked in San Francisco, I looked in, I didn't look in Chicago, so I can't speak to that. But, and there was different, some had much larger, Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, Ram signage or lit cans, and some had smaller. If it was a one-story building, it just kind of fits the size of the building, basically, proportionately.
They generally scale them to the building. We do a lot of work in the Silicon Valley, where everything is bigger than life. And it's the exact same look, just, tweaked onto one of their buildings with the same kind of materials. It might have a great big circle, but it's gonna be the same kind of ACM. They're not gonna mess with the Dodge Jeep Ram. Those are the badges, and that's the brand, and that's what they're gonna see. Same colors, same everything. And including Woodland. I was up there the other day, and they have a one-story tall building, really small, and there's the Dodge. I'm thinking, yep, that's exactly as it looks. So,
But you couldn't frame like these monument signs, you couldn't frame them in stone or something. You couldn't do any kind of treatment like that. I mean, they don't have to just be there like they are. Do you follow what I'm saying? Could you frame them in timber, like some big, giant, rough-hewn timber, anything to soften that.
I'm just gonna throw a no out there and see how that rides. I would say no. I'd say that you're asking a completely separate set of questions for building components and, you know, back to the drawing board. It's not a Western look. It's a corporate branding look.
That's exactly the problem.
It is what it is, and I've been through this. We do science here all the time, and we can Westernize a lot of things. In fact, Andrew and I went through quite a big, long one at the 76 station down the street, where we had to have the 76, and it had to be in wood, and it had to be so bright, and so we made sure that we could make that happen. 76 didn't care as long as the orange ball was in there. This is not the same case. This comes from a corporate supplier of signage.
And that 76 sign you mentioned, that was on Main Street, much closer to downtown proper?
Correct.
Okay.
We had to put in filigrees and all that to get it to be sellable.
Yeah. I generally don't like to comment on aesthetics of signs, but I will say what's being done with sign K looks to me like a drastic improvement. The existing sign K looks like something you might see in Utapao or Manila, and the new sign looks maybe industrial, but it's very, very succinct and very crisp. And to my colleague's point about softening or making it harmonious with the rest of what we at least view as the Placerville image. It's like in Pasadena in Southern California. Everything has to be done the Pasadena way. And I sympathize with that, but I think also to Member Friend's point about convening some sort of process and providing guidelines to some level of detail so that people know what to expect on terms of what we think is appropriate softening. I think we owe that to the applicants. What I am uncomfortable doing is waiting until game day and then trying to do the hoss trading in this room. I think the appropriate place for that is on the 4th floor or the 2nd floor at City Hall. So that's where I'm leaning. Is I think we have a lot of rathers and druthers, but absent some guidance to give applicants in general a fair idea of what it is that's going to be expected ahead of getting to hearing day, I don't see a remedy for that. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, gentlemen. Any members of the public wish to address this item?
I would, thank you. Steve Calfee. I'm not interested really in addressing the specifics of the sign application as before you because I'm not that familiar with it. But what I am familiar with are the enabling wording in your sign code. And when you review the master sign package, there's wording in the sign code that says you must make a finding of superior design that complements the community. And that gives you a great deal of discretion. And so if there's something before you that you dislike, you can exercise that discretion. It exists in the city code. One other comment with respect to the outstanding issues relating to the site. I believe that there is a reasonable nexus that you could tie the approval of a master sign package, issuance of a permit to a master sign package that requires all of the outstanding issues as identified by city staff to be satisfied to city staff's satisfaction prior to the issuance of a sign permit for a sign. And I think you have that discretion as well. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening, Commission. Overall, the sign package is fairly clean, even stark, as one member mentioned. And I'm just requesting that there only be one pole sign. I would prefer to see the proposed second pole signage be placed upon the primary existing one. Or if you feel to deem a second pole sign, at least to soften that look, the pole structure itself be painted a dark to medium brown, or even somewhat resembling a tree trunk, something to, you can throw a bone towards Placerville style. The question on the, they call it that arch, the entrance. It mentions in the package that it's internally illuminated, but is it going to be completely illuminated like the Toyota one? I think the applicant said no. I'm just assuming the area around the Thompson's part above the arch is going to be illuminated, because the commission really did look at Toyota's proposed lighting on that. How much is it going to broadcast out towards 50? And you really scrutinized it. So just clarification on that. And it's just with the with modern cell phones, and you just speak to them and say, take me to Thompson's Dodge, and it takes you right to the driveway. It seems like signage is, here you have wall signs, pole signs, a second pole sign. It seems to be getting a little excessive, but just give it some thought. Thanks.
Kirk Smith of Placerville. The subject of pole signs is very confusing because I've seen a lot of different ways these subjects have been handled. Steve Calfee can tell you, as Cleve Morris, that about 5 or 6 years ago the city went after about 80 pole signs in the town, very aggressively. Standing right here on appeal to the city council was the president of Western Sign Company with David Bausel, because of the Red Cross sign on Highway 49, just beyond Pacific Street. And David Brazelton went over a whole series of state laws about why that did not need to be touched and shouldn't have been touched. Didn't do any good. It came down and it cost him, he said, $9,000 to take it down and replace it with what the city does. And you can look at what the city did, required. It's pretty ugly. And that pole sign of just the Red Cross to people all over the world is a symbol of community, of welcome, and that's a kind of nice thing to have there. And my sign, I present my presentation, we get an answer from the mayor, and then Steve comes in and gives, brand new arguments. And then a number of years later, as of late last year, they changed their mind. So what is your policy? You don't need pole signs, number one. Patty Borelli told me that a number of years ago, that there were studies on it, and she's right. Everybody here has a cell phone. I'd be surprised if you don't have an app where you can't talk to it and say, Dodge Repair, and it'll tell you how to get there. So, God, a few years from now, what are we gonna need? So, it's a bad design. Just as Mike Grobish said, you don't need 2 poles, and you don't need it that garish. Just as one of your colleagues said, there's no reason to have a different design. Consistent with what Steve Calfee said. You have that authority. You have tremendous power. So you could have it made of wood beams, a wood structure. You could have it masonry, stone. There's lots of things you can do to have it more compatible. Now, it's true, somebody could come in just like the architect for the 49er project and show you a whole bunch of photographs, as they did, for a different hodgepodge about how almost anything goes in this town. But the real question is, should it? Yes, you've got a big, ugly sign, as I view it, for Office Max and the hamburger place down there. But as you come up the road into town, just past Diamond Lumber, all of what you see is the landscaping that our ancestors would have seen arriving here. And to me, that says Placerville more than any neon billboard. So I support Steve Calfee's suggestion that you do have the authority. Just because staff has said what they'd like to do. You're the final determiner of what can be done. And it doesn't send a very good message to have these different conflicting decisions where some people have to pay $9,000 to take their sign down and replace it with some ugly structure. So thank you very much for your time. Good luck, and I'll vote with Thompson Motors because I bought plenty of cars from him.
Thank you. Anyone else? The applicant usually gets a second bite at the apple. Go ahead.
Okay. They're right about the two signs. I completely agree. So I would be willing, if you guys were okay with it, to get rid of the, I know it's a nice feature for some, but the time and temperature sign, completely get rid of that and replace it with the brand sign.
Just to make sure I'm clear, so the existing time and temperature sign, you're talking about getting rid of that one.
Yes.
So instead of 3 pole signs, we'll only have 2. Total.
You only have one now. We're proposing to.
That's what I meant. It looks like we're gonna have lollipops all along there.
Right,
And
right.
that was my other objection that we hadn't gotten to yet.
Yeah. And I think this is shorter than this current one.
It's a little, I think it's a little bit shorter.
Couple feet.
And we're talking about whether to keep it in the original position that we talked about, or to have it take the place of the Thompson's big pole sign that's there, just put the Jeep one in. Because we already have a Toyota sign further on down the parking lot. Just came to me just now.
The staff has a comment regarding
If we
that.
keep them here a little longer, we might get more.
Yeah.
Although if I understand the changes would involve a use permit that's already been granted. Although it's alluded to in the staff report, it's alluded to in the sense that it's a component of the overall master sign plan. To staff's perspective, what they're proposing, as I understand it, would be a modification of that use permit. And that would be subject to another hearing. I think to be clean, you could look at the other signage that's proposed tonight and perhaps address that to the applicant and invite them to come back for a modification of the use permit from 2010, which is referenced in the staff report. I don't know if Director Rivas has a comment on my analysis there, but I think that's the cleanest way to handle it. Technically, once again, the time and temp, as we'll call the existing pole sign, it's a component of tonight's review as an overall component of the master sign plan. There were no proposals prior just a few minutes ago to modify that particular pole sign. So I think from our due diligence and for the public, that would involve a separate application. So I think you could look at the remaining signage on the site if you wish, or you could defer this to another time where they could bring back a modification to the other use permit. Any questions?
So I have a question for the applicants. Is your blood pressure rising if you have to come back to clean this up, make it all neat?
I think the biggest concern is not the pole sign right now. It's to get the entry element going and get the signs up on the building. Even today, it's going to sound crazy, but at least 2 or 3 times a week, people show up at Toyota. I know it seems funny, but they just don't see the banners that are up there right now. So just to clean it up and get it to look, like a Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram store, if it's possible to approve the signs that are going on the building, at least we can get them ordered, because it's still going to take a few months to get them.
So to make sure I understand, if we approve the building signs and defer the pole signs to clean up the issues related to that, that still keeps you going?
Yeah.
Keeps you in the game? Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, the public gets to comment some more. Thank you, gentlemen. Anyone else? Okay, we'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission for discussion and possible action.
So if I understand correctly, what we're going to do is decouple sign B from the remainder of the process. All of the other signs are part of our decision. Okay. I think it's one way to demonstrate some flexibility.
Mr. Chairman, I think technically it might be evaluating A and B. A is the new, and B would be the existing. Would that clarify? I think it.
Well, as I look at this aerial photograph, I see a B at the corner of Forney and the driveway for the Toyota dealership, and I don't see an existing pole sign at that location. Looking at the aerial photo.
Yeah, it's that's the time and temp.
I beg your pardon?
That's the time and what we're calling the time and temp pole sign. That
But it's
exists
not
today.
in the photo, is it?
Oh, I
It's just
see.
Yeah,
off
it's there.
Is it?
Just the angle of the
Oh.
camera angle.
Okay.
All you see is a very short planimetric view of at the top of the sign.
Yeah. And this is why satellite photos are all taken at 10 o'clock local time, so you can calculate the heights of towers and other vertical elements like that.
Yeah, I just bring
Okay,
up,
well,
I just
you
bring
know,
up both of those. 'Cause
okay,
they're- yeah.
so A is a new sign because there's nothing there but plants at A. B, again, it's existing, but I don't see it in the picture. So that's my problem, I guess.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So then so we're decoupling both A and B from this process tonight then, and we're evaluating signs C through Z.
Yeah, it appears they're
Okay.
reconsidering their
Okay.
request for the new pole sign to address the issues related to the comments received and members of the commission. So, yeah.
Sorry for being slow on the uptake.
Mr. Chairman, I just want, before the commission or someone makes a motion on this, I do appreciate Mr. Calfee's comments, and I don't want those to get lost in the discussion. From what I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's entirely legitimate to tie completion, rectification of all outstanding violations on this property to any action that we should take tonight and get that dealt with. The other thing that Mr. Calfee mentioned was in the sign ordinance. It does in fact give this body the power to reject an application should we find that it does in fact not bring additional visual value. Now, having said that particular issue, I'm totally sympathetic to Mr. Thompson and others in that, because we can in fact take that action, and it puts them in the middle, because then corporate's going to say, well, you don't do this and you're not going to get the dealership. So I concur with Mr. Calfee's assessment, and I really appreciate it. The question will be, of course, if the commission, is willing to do that. And I really wish, and the effort that you're giving us this evening notwithstanding, I do appreciate what we're doing in terms of the pole signs, but it really becomes very, very difficult. But I don't think we should forget about tying the other matter to the approval. We should not shy away from that.
I do want to thank Mr. Calfee for his input and edification. I always learn so much at these meetings. My caution with exercising some of these powers that we have, I think recent experience that this board has had, or this commission has had, is that we should always keep foremost in mind the potential criticism of being capricious and arbitrary in our actions. Whether or not it's a criticism that has merit, it can be a criticism that has influence and has effect in the larger community. With regard to coupling what I think are properly enforcement actions, I'd be much happier if the segment of city government responsible for pursuing these enforcement actions and bringing them to closure were not left for the Planning Commission to resolve. I mean, I don't think it's within our purview, and as a civil servant of 30 years standing, I'm also conscious of the impact of being perceived as bigfooting somebody else's pitch. So, I mean, if there's enforcement action, and presumably those people in city government who have intent to conduct that enforcement action and bring it to closure, then it relieves the Planning Commission of the responsibility to being placed in the role as a traffic cop here and telling people, you know, press hard, you're making 6 copies.
Any other discussion? Questions of staff? I have a comment before we move to a motion. This just reminds me of one time when I was in the service. It was payday, and the guy that comes around with the check says, "You don't get a check today." And of course, I ran up 3 flights of stairs because I didn't want to go home and tell my wife I wasn't bringing home a check. And they said, "Oh, well, we've been overpaying you for 5 years, and so it would all added up to you don't get a check today." This is making me feel like that kind of situation. The problem has occurred due to many things that have happened and not happened, and I think it's, you know, we have some responsibility to you know, use whatever hammer we might have with great care. And I don't think trying to solve the problem all at once right here is quite fair, either for the applicant or to not how the city should be perceived either. So I'm not inclined to couple those together. Although I agree, every time Mr. Calfee comes, we learn something new, and usually good. Thank you. Is anybody prepared to make a motion?
Well, my motions, I almost said movements, are never pretty. So you get what you get, folks. But my motion is that we adopt the staff recommendation as enumerated in Roman numerals 1 through 6 with the, I don't know, is codicil the right word? Caveat, or with the understanding that elements A and B of this application are obeyed until such time as the applicant is prepared to come forward with, I don't know if it's a separate application or, you know, how that works out procedurally, but the intent is to allow them to decouple A and B from the rest of the application and proposal and allow the commission to approve or disapprove items C through Z. That's my motion. Okay. So, was it really? Okay.
I second that motion.
Any further discussion?
Thank you.
So I think it's just, it's clear, it would be helpful to summarize that we're approving the staff report as submitted and the accompanying findings, and and conditions of approval, and with the exception that we're removing A and B from approval or denial in this action, with the understanding that you'll return with another application and supporting documents related to A and B. Staff?
Yeah, I've got to ask a clarification question. The motion maker member Lowry, was it your intent to include Roman numeral 4 as it reads now? Because it mentions the CUP, which is relative to the new pole sign.
Well,
I don't think it sounds like you're decoupling that from tonight's review.
right, and I apologize because I read it as Roman numeral 6, so
Oh, yes, that's my mistake. I'm sorry.
not that I'm trying to muddy the waters at all here, you understand?
You're absolutely right. Thank you.
But my intent,
My dyslexia is showing, I
my
guess.
intent, regardless of my bloviations and carelessness, was to decouple items A and B so that they can be adjudicated at a later time.
Just for clarification, when we're saying items A and B,
The signs identified as
signs,
the signs identified
signs
as
A and B, and
Yeah.
for clarity, say pole signs specifically.
a pole sign and a pylon sign, as it happens.
Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
I'll call the question.
Member Lowry,
Aye.
Member Roby,
Aye.
Member Friend,
No.
Vice Chair List,
Aye.
Chair Wolf.
Aye. And in deference to the late hour, I suggest we take a 5-minute break. Thank you.
That one may trigger sanctions, monetary sanctions until.
Thank you, everyone. We'll reconvene the Planning Commission meeting, and I believe we're ready to move on to item 4.4 regarding 618 Main Street conditional use permit. Consider matters relating to the Planning Commission denial without prejudice of the project at our December 15, 2015 meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a little background. On December 15th, the Planning Commission denied without prejudice the project at 618 Main Street, conditional use permit 2015-03 and site plan review 2015-05 and variance 2015-03. Staff has considered various comments, and staff consulted with its legal counsel, and we've come to sort of a different conclusion than we originally did at that last meeting. Basically, it is staff's and council's opinion that the commission's decision was clear and that it deemed the application as incomplete and did not consider the project on its merits. And so by finding that its action was without prejudice to the applicant, the commission is not making a final decision, but rather inviting the applicant to make a resubmittal for consideration by the commission. In essence, the commission sent the project back to the applicant to submit a complete application. If the applicant has provided additional information in response to the commission's comments, the matter before the commission is a resubmittal of a previously incomplete submittal. The commission found in its motion that the application is deemed insufficient to the specifics regarding landscaping, paving surfaces and materials, erosion control, and compliance with standards for parking lots, and therefore the commission is not in a position to consider the project as submitted. And that's how the vote was rendered. So with that in mind, and it's not necessary then for the commission to take any action this evening, but what staff would like to have is a discussion, if you will, with the applicant as to when they're going to submit the materials to make the applicant complete. So once that's happened, or the way the process would unfold, the applicant is going to submit these items that the commission felt made the applicant or the application incomplete to staff. Staff will then analyze the information, prepare a new staff report, and then schedule it for hearing. But staff wants to ensure that this isn't going to be 1 month, 6 months, or a year from now. So staff would like to have a commitment from the applicant as to when it can expect, with reasonable time involved, to submit the materials that would be necessary to have a complete application that then the staff would bring back to the commission at an agendized hearing.
Mr. Chairman?
Any questions you have at this time?
If I may, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Pierre. I had a conversation with the applicant's representative today, and they said on or before May 17. The question I really have, and the only reason that I requested in a public setting at our last meeting that this be brought back for reconsideration, deals with the fee for submittal. If there is a fee for them to resubmit the application, then I would like to move forward with a request for reconsideration and change it from a denial without prejudice to a continuation to May 17. If there is no fee associated with it, then it doesn't need to happen. I think everyone wants this to be resolved to the point where an application is brought to us to consider and then either approve or deny, and then it'll probably go to City Council, approve or deny. And I think that's in the best interest of everyone to have a date certain for that, which they gave me today, and then we can be done with it. So I guess the question directly is, will they have to pay the $1,400 or $1,500 application fee again?
Under the scenario that staff just expressed to you and the procedures would be following, there would be no additional fees. We would be proceeding under the original application.
Okay, then I'm not sure it's necessary then for us to take this action, and I believe that the application is going to be submitted in time for it to be agendized for consideration by the Planning Commission on no later than May 17, and we can have an up and down vote based upon our review at that juncture.
Yes, staff needs clarification on when would be the deadline for the submittal of the materials necessary to make the
Okay, so
application complete.
then I don't have that specific date. They said the
So-
meeting, they would, they
Not
would
the
shoot-
meeting date, because
Right.
staff would need time to evaluate the materials submitted, prepare a new staff report,
Sure.
and then set it for hearing. We'll do the noticing and
Okay.
everything else. So what staff would like to ask is that the commission then have that discussion, here at this meeting with the applicant on when the applicant can reasonably expect to submit these materials to staff.
Could I ask how much time staff would ideally like to have to do this? Let's assume the applicant is saying, we want this heard no later than May 17. Okay, so how many days working backwards? How much time does staff need? When do they need that submitted? I think that would be the question. And then ask the applicant if they could commit to that.
No earlier, 45 days would be the very basic minimum.
Okay, so that's half, right? So that's going to be late March, I'm going to say.
Are you referring to the amount of time that staff needs to evaluate the request? And
Yeah.
prepare the noticing? Then
To
I
do
would
everything,
say
right.
at a bare minimum, 45 days.
Okay.
60 days would be more appropriate.
Okay. I know that Mr. Howe is going in for surgery very soon. I think today was his pre-op, as a matter of fact. So I think that had some consideration with it. I'll yield to the chair.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff? Okay, we'll go ahead and ask the applicant to address the commission. And you probably know what we're going to ask.
Phil McCarthy, representing Wilbur Howe and Marilyn McCarthy. And Wilbur would have been here tonight, but he's, for medical reasons, unable to make this meeting, and he's scheduled for surgery next week. He'll need time to recuperate and be part of this endeavor that we're about to engage in. When you had your discussion today, I believe it had to do with the amount of time it would take us to, do a thorough job and make a presentation, a submittal by May 17th, followed by whatever staff time is necessary to review and agendize the item.
So I'm a little bit confused by that. Right now, if the meeting date would be May 17, and based upon staff's request for 45 days, plus or minus, it would be by March 29, the application would have to be submitted to city staff.
Yeah, that would not work for us.
All right, so can you give us a date by which you could have your application prepared and submitted?
By May 17th, 90 days would be
Okay, to submit.
totally adequate.
Okay. It's immaterial to me when we have, as long as we have a date certain, and then the item gets done and brought to us, we can review it and approve or deny and move on. So it's deny without prejudice, which means they can bring it back any time, so at least we have some specificity.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Anyone in the public wish to address this item? I think we're done with,
All right,
sir.
thank you.
Last chance. Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public comment part of this item and bring it back to the commission for comments, questions, and possible action.
To staff, do we need to do anything at this point then? Do we have to open the item, take a vote or anything, or?
No.
Okay.
No action necessary.
Great.
As long as we have the date certain, because if they don't meet that date, well, then we can set it for hearing, then you can actually deny the application.
And I think that's important for the applicant to realize that if they do not meet that date, then the application will be deemed denied. And that's a whole different set of circumstances.
And I have a comment too that I don't intentionally mean this to sound all cranky, but we do have to remember, and the applicant needs to really be aware of the fact that this project has been reviewed, considered, and denied literally several times. We could quibble over the definition of several, but it's had a rocky road here because the applications have not included appropriate specifics on certain components of the project in past submittals. And so with great hope that the applicant and the applicant's agents will take care with this next submittal, I think it'll be good for us to be able to dispose of this. I'll give you a chance to respond in a second, but I want to finish first. Oh, yes, you may. So when you're in a hole, you got to stop digging, and we've all been kind of stuck in this hole. So I have great hope that we'll be able to get this worked out for everyone's satisfaction and the benefit of all concerned. So I'm really looking forward to a nice, solid submittal package. Sir, you want to?
As are we. And Mr. Friend's admonition earlier in the evening, unrelated to, well, I'm not sure it was unrelated. It had some focus.
Everything's related.
Yeah. The message was received, and as was your little counsel on, having paid for something for years, and all of a sudden now you're not going to get anything. So that was all good little messages sending. So we look forward to making the submittal that's going to meet your needs and ours. And thanks much for your attention.
And that's the goal. Thank you. So since no action's required, we'll close that item and move on to matters from commission and staff. And as we do so, thank you, audience, for hanging in there tonight. Anybody have any items? Any commissioners? Any comments from staff?
Yeah, it does not appear that we will have a March 1st meeting. I can tell you, though, that the staff is preparing a change in the way we submit items to you. And it will echo, this is kind of the direction from Director Rivas, related to, it's similar to what the county planning staff does with their planning commission, city council. We've heard from the public that the city's not giving enough time for people to evaluate a request before it comes to hearing, timeliness of getting comments in to meet the packet deadlines, etc. To address that, we have taken steps, because we don't have a meeting on the 1st of March, to, at that point, on that date, we will have staff reports, or staff report at this point. There's one item for the March 15th meeting. So the staff report will be made available to you as close to that March 1 date as possible. The agenda will still come out 72 hours in advance, and public comment will be received up until the day before we prepare the agenda and the week before the meeting. So for an item like on the 15th of March, for example, is an item involving a sign package amendment. Imagine that. Another one of those for you guys to review. This time involves a gas station, and we anticipate getting that public notice out tomorrow. So that's nearly 30 days of public time to comment. We'll also have sign elevations that'll be the receiver of the notice we have links to our website, if you all haven't noticed, where you can look and see where applications, what they've submitted, etc., prior to you getting the staff report. So that will still continue. But do you understand where I'm going with it? The staff reports would be made available a couple weeks prior, but public comment would be received up until a day before we prepare the agenda. Then we would package all public comment, the agenda. You would be notified to pick up that at the regular receiver point there at the
So is the basic approach to provide us with as much documentation on forthcoming agenda items, like for example, at this meeting, we would be provided as much as you could for the next meeting.
That's correct.
And then we recognize that other items are going to catch up.
That's correct.
But we would have the main body of the issue and the materials as close as you can to 2 weeks in advance,
Correct.
instead of getting it 5 days before or whatever. Okay, thank you.
That's the intent.
Actually, that reminds me, with respect to that, when I'm grateful to have the additional time, but you know, when I pick up my package from Cary House, what's contained in that package informs my analysis and my decision making largely, with the input of testimony. Speaking only for myself, documents that arrive over the transom the night of the meeting, I don't consider as part of my analysis. I believe it's a two-way street to respect the process and the timing of the process. So while I'm happy to receive these, I make no commitment to review or analyze them on the night of the meeting.
But I agree and kind of disagree. I think this process will also allow the public to not having to be attaching their comments to rocks and throwing them at the boat as it's leaving the dock.
I think that's
they'll have
wonderful.
more time.
I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that'll be good.
And
but I agree with you. The stuff that comes at you the night of, and then there's all those issues of it's not generally available, it's not noticed, et cetera, et cetera.
And I can't make any promises with information that, you know, I can't make any decisions based on pillow talk.
Well, if it's any consolation, the intent is to direct the commentator to submit their comments so that it becomes part of the agenda item, the agenda document that would be given to you. So at that, you would be getting that normally on a Thursday. We will continue to attempt to do that. So you would have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday to review those comments. But you're right. We make every effort to get to you the comments we receive. The comments we got tonight, of course, were not. I was told that they were coming this afternoon by the gentleman, by the speaker, but I didn't have those items to pass out to you until tonight. And yes, I'm very sensitive to getting this stuff at the last minute. And this process, the way we've kind of looked at it and started it, it should give the public more time to comment. We hope that they will use that time to do it and meet the deadlines so that you can get it ahead of time. But we'll see what happens.
All right.
That's all I've got.
Thank you. I would think we would have a consensus to consider the meeting adjourned.